The Xiva Dominion had ruled the stars for over 2,000 years, its armies carving a path of conquest across the galaxy. To the Xiva, war was not just a necessity, it was a birthright. Entire species had been subjugated beneath their might, their homeworlds turned into factories and breeding grounds for the Dominion's ever-expanding war machine. When the Xiva High Command first set its sights on Earth, they expected another swift conquest. Humanity, after all, was nothing special. Their technology was primitive by Dominion standards. Their weapons, while effective on their own kind, were laughable against the Xiva's energy-based warfare. Their armies, despite their numbers, lacked the sheer physical power of a Xiva warrior. And yet, humanity resisted. For 6 long months, Earth burned. Cities crumbled under planetary bombardments, military bases were reduced to smoldering wastelands, and entire continents fell under Xiva control. Billions perished. Entire governments collapsed. The Dominion's war machine rolled over the planet, unstoppable. Or so they thought. As organized resistance crumbled, the survivors of humanity did something that no species had ever done before: they refused to surrender. They did not retreat to beg for mercy. They did not kneel to their conquerors. Instead, they scattered into the ruins, into the forests, into the tunnels beneath their own dead cities, where they waged a war of ghosts. It wasn't the kind of war the Xiva were used to. There were no grand battles, no glorious charges. Instead, Xiva patrols went missing. Supply convoys exploded without warning. Elite strike teams sent into the ruins never returned. The Xiva had expected their victory to be complete, but now, it was turning into something else entirely, a war of shadows and blood. And among those shadows, a name began to spread. A name that would soon become legend. Baba Yaga. The Xiva's laughter. Inside the war room of the Dominion's Wrath, the flagship of the Xiva Third Invasion Fleet, General Vrothkar stood at the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by his highest-ranking officers. Towering 8 feet tall, his powerful frame was covered in deep green scales, his armor adorned with the skulls of fallen enemies. A massive holo-display projected the latest footage from Earth's battlefields. It showed a series of human insurgents fighting in the ruins of a city, most of them women. Vrotkar's lip curled in disgust. They send their females into battle now. His deep voice rumbled through the chamber. The officers surrounding him burst into laughter. One of them, Commander Julrock, pointed at the screen. Look at them. Fragile. Slow. Weak. His claws tapped against the hollow projector, zooming in on a group of female fighters setting up an ambush in a ruined cathedral. They think they can stand against us. Another officer, Varunash, bared his fangs. This is what their species has been reduced to. Their men are broken, so they send their breeders to die in their place. More laughter. The Xiva prided themselves on physical supremacy. Their soldiers were bio-enhanced, their bodies naturally armored, their strength far beyond what any human could achieve. Among their kind, females were kept for breeding and political alliances, not for war. The very thought of human women taking up arms against them was nothing short of an insult. They are desperate, Julrock continued. They know they cannot win, and yet they struggle like trapped vermin. It is pathetic. Vrothkar exhaled through his nostrils, watching as one of the women on the screen, dark-haired, with piercing blue eyes, moved through the rubble like a phantom. The footage was grainy, but something about her caught his attention. She moved differently than the others. Calculating. Precise. Who is that? He asked, narrowing his reptilian eyes. Julrock shrugged. One of their commanders, perhaps. It hardly matters. She will die with the rest. Vrothkar leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. We end this tonight. Deploy the shock troopers. Burn this city to the ground. Julrock grinned, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. And the females, sir? Vrothkar smirked. Kill them all. The laughter continued. They had no idea they were marching into hell. A ruined city, a deadly hunter. The city had once been called Novigrad, one of the many old-world capitals that had stood for centuries before the Xiva razed it to the ground. Now, it was nothing more than a corpse of steel and stone, its buildings shattered, its streets filled with the wreckage of human civilization. Beneath the rubble, inside an old cathedral half swallowed by fire and dust, a lone figure crouched in the shadows. Her name was Anya Volkov. To the Xiva, she would soon be known by another name. Baba Yaga. Her blue eyes were sharp and unyielding, scanning the enemy patrols as they moved through the ruins. The Xiva thought they were the hunters, thought they were superior. She smirked. They had no idea what was coming. Anya adjusted her grip on the karambit knife strapped to her wrist. The blade was old, a relic passed down through her family. It had tasted the blood of enemies long before the Xiva came, and it would taste their blood tonight. She had been a Spetsnaz operative before the war. Trained in close-quarters combat, infiltration, and psychological warfare. When the invasion came, she didn't flee. She fought. And when the rest of her unit was wiped out, she continued fighting. She became something else. Something the enemy feared. A ghost in the ruins. She had spent weeks studying them, learning their patrol patterns, understanding their weaknesses. The Xiva thought themselves invincible, but she had learned the truth: they could bleed. They could die. And tonight, they would. Outside, hundreds of Xiva shock troopers marched into the city, their heavy armor clanking against the pavement. Plasma rifles hummed in their hands, scanning for movement. They were expecting frightened humans, scattered resistance fighters. They weren't expecting her. From the darkness, she whispered into her radio. The hunt begins. Then she disappeared into the ruins. And the slaughter began. The Xiva shock troopers moved in tight formation, their heavy boots crushing the rubble beneath them. The ruined city of Novigrad loomed around them, broken and burned, the skeletal remains of its buildings casting eerie shadows against the flickering fires that still smoldered. Commander Jules Roch led the assault, confident that this would be just another routine purge. The human resistance had been a nuisance, but nothing more. Now, they would end it once and for all. A cold wind howled through the ruins, carrying the scent of ash and death. Jules Roch sneered. "These humans hide like rats," he muttered, his claws flexing against the grip of his plasma rifle. "We should burn this entire sector down and be done with it." His second-in-command, Captain Drelvas, nodded. "Agreed. The females especially. I do not understand why they insist on fighting. They are smaller, weaker, slower." A chuckle rippled through the squad. The Xiva believed in physical supremacy above all else. To them, human women fighting in battle was an insult, an act of desperation. They had no idea how wrong they were. The first kill. The patrol advanced deeper into the ruins, their armored suits glowing faintly with the blue energy of their shields. Plasma rifles swept left and right, searching for movement. The city was silent, too silent. Then, a whisper. Jules Roch froze. "Did you hear that?" Drelvas turned, scanning the rooftops. The wind. Nothing more. Then, something dropped from above. A shadow slammed into a Xiva trooper, driving a blade through the soft gap between his helmet and armor. A sharp twist. A gurgle. Blood sprayed. The body collapsed without a sound. The Xiva barely had time to react before the attacker vanished into the darkness. What was that? Drelvas snarled, aiming his rifle. His eyes darted through the ruins, but nothing moved. Jules Roch cursed. "Spread out. Find them." The squad fanned out, sweeping the area with their weapons. Then, the second kill. Another Xiva went down, his throat ripped open in a single slash. His plasma rifle clattered to the ground as he gasped for air that would never come. Still, no sound. No war cries. No screams. No gunfire. Only shadows and death. Drelvas's breathing turned ragged. "We're being hunted." Jules Roch snarled. "By who?" Then, from the darkness, came a whisper. A voice like death itself. "Baba Yaga." A gunshot rang out. A single suppressed bullet tore through Drelvas's skull. His head snapped back, a fine mist of blood spraying the air as his body crumpled. Jules Roch's blood turned to ice. This was no ordinary human. This was something else. The fear spreads. The Xiva soldiers, once arrogant and confident, began to panic. Their training meant nothing. Their superior weapons meant nothing. Their size and strength meant nothing. Baba Yaga wasn't fighting a battle. She was hunting. And they were prey. One by one, they fell. A knife slipped between armor plates. A throat was cut in silence. A shot rang out, and another skull shattered. Jules Roch saw one of his men screaming, dragged into the darkness. A moment later, a severed head rolled into the firelight, lifeless eyes staring up at him. This wasn't war. This was terror. A desperate stand. Jules Roch gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to die like an animal. "Fall back," he roared. "Regroup. We will burn this ghost out." The surviving Xiva scrambled into a defensive circle, their rifles aimed outward. Their breathing was ragged. Their hands trembled. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. They were supposed to be the predators. Instead, they were trapped. Then, silence. No movement. No whispers. Only the cold wind through the ruins. A moment passed. Then another. Then. A figure emerged from the darkness. A woman, clad in black tactical gear, her face partially obscured by a mask. Her eyes, cold as winter, burned with a merciless hunger. She held a karambit knife, its blade dripping with Zyvar blood. The Zyvar hesitated. Julrock could smell their fear. She shouldn't be standing there. One human. Against 8 Zyvar shock troopers. It was suicide. Then, she smiled. And Julrock felt something he had never felt before. Dread. The slaughter. It happened too fast. One moment, Baba Yaga stood before them. The next, she was among them. A knife flashed. A throat opened. Blood sprayed. A Zyvar went down, gurgling. A plasma rifle fired wildly, but she was already gone. Another trooper screamed as his arm was severed at the joint, his own blade driven into his heart. Julrock tried to fire, but Baba Yaga was already behind him. A sharp pain exploded in his side. He screamed as the knife buried itself beneath his ribs. He collapsed, gasping. The last thing he saw was Baba Yaga standing over him, her eyes glowing in the firelight. Then, darkness. A dull hum filled the air as the Zyvar Dominion's command ship, Dominion's Wrath, hovered above the ruins of Novigrad. Its massive silhouette cast an ominous shadow over the battlefield, its hull bristling with cannons and energy turrets. Below, hundreds of Zyvar shock troopers combed the city, their weapons raised, their movements tense. But Novigrad was silent. The bodies of Julrock's elite squad had been recovered hours ago, or what was left of them. The corpses had been butchered, eviscerated with surgical precision. Some had been shot. Others had their throats cut. One had been found hanging from a ruined balcony, his body stripped of armor, his chest carved with strange symbols. The Zyvar didn't understand the meaning behind the marks, but the humans knew. It was a message. I am coming for you. Inside the command center of Dominion's Wrath, General Vrothkar stood before a massive holo display, his reptilian eyes narrowed. The footage showed the aftermath of the massacre. It wasn't war. It was slaughter. And now, his army was afraid. Across the room, Commander Kaeldrak stood stiffly, his claws flexing in discomfort. Sir, we lost an entire strike team. Someone is targeting us. Vrothkar's gaze snapped to him. One of your best squads. Cut down in the dark. His voice was like grinding stone. You call that someone? Kaeldrak hesitated. Sir, the survivors, they spoke of a human. A female. Vrothkar's jaw tightened. A single female killed my men. Kaeldrak nodded, uneasy. They called her Baba Yaga. The moment the name left his lips, silence fell over the chamber. One of the officers, Captain Vrelkae, let out a scoff. A human myth. The troops are rattled. Superstition is clouding their judgment. Kaeldrak clenched his fists. With respect, Captain, do you think ghost stories did this? He pointed at the screen. We have warriors too terrified to step into the ruins. Some refuse to leave the perimeter. If this continues. Vrothkar raised a hand. Silence. He turned back to the screen, watching the shadows flicker over the broken city. Then he spoke, his voice cold. Deploy the Dread Stalkers. A new breed of hunters. Night fell over Novigrad. The ruined city breathed in the dark, wind whispering through shattered buildings. But this time, the Zyvar didn't send ordinary soldiers. The Dread Stalkers were something else. 7 feet tall, cloaked in chameleon armor, their bodies enhanced for silent movement. These were the Zyvar's elite assassins, trained in the art of hunting and extermination. They moved like shadows, their presence unseen, their energy weapons silent. Their orders were simple. Find Baba Yaga. Kill her. They spread through the ruins, their helmets scanning for heat signatures, their visors detecting even the faintest breath of movement. Nothing. Only ruins. Only silence. Then, a sound. A soft scraping, just beyond a crumbling apartment complex. The lead stalker, Vreknar, motioned for his squad to move forward. No hesitation. These were trained killers. They did not fear. They entered the building, their weapons raised. Then, a single bullet whistled through the dark. Vreknar barely had time to react before his skull exploded. The others froze. From the shadows, a whisper. You should have run. Then, hell broke loose. The killing field. The first stalker fell before he even knew what hit him. A blade slipped between his ribs, twisting deep, his lungs filling with blood. He choked, gasping, and then he was gone. The second turned to fire, but a knife flashed in the dark, slicing through his wrist. His weapon clattered to the ground as a brutal heel slammed into his throat, crushing his windpipe. The third staggered back, his cloaking field flickering. He tried to retreat, tried to regroup. A silenced pistol barked. A single bullet punched through his visor, and he collapsed. 3 dead in 6 seconds. The others began to panic. This wasn't a fight. This was extermination. One of the stalkers, Drekvos, activated his energy blade, slashing at the darkness. "Come out, coward," he roared. A whisper in his ear. "Behind you." His blood turned to ice. A hand grabbed his head, yanked it back. A cold blade sliced across his throat. Blood sprayed into the night air. Drekvos collapsed, choking. The last 2 stalkers turned and ran. They had faced countless battles. Killed hundreds. But this? This was something else. This wasn't a woman. This was death itself. One of them barely made it 10 steps before a wire looped around his neck. A sharp pull. A sickening snap. His body hit the ground. The last one, Zekha, managed to make it to a clearing. His armor was coated in blood, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He activated his distress beacon, his voice shaking. Command, requesting immediate extraction. A gun pressed against the back of his head. Denied. The shot rang out. Zekha's body crumpled. And Baba Yaga stood alone. The Zyvar's fear. The transmission cut off abruptly inside Dominion's wrath. Vrothkar stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. 7 of his best warriors. Gone. In the chamber, no one spoke. Then, a single message pinged onto the main screen. A human message. It contained only 2 words. "You're next." A cold chill ran through the Zyvi officers. For the first time in 2,000 years of conquest. They were afraid. The Zyvi were on high alert. Inside the Dominion's wrath, the corridors pulsed with crimson emergency lights. Every hallway was patrolled by armed guards, every blast door was sealed, every turret was primed to fire. General Vrothkar had mobilized the entire ship. No more arrogance. No more dismissing her as a ghost story. Baba Yaga was real. And she was coming. Vrothkar stood on the bridge, his claws digging into the control panel. His officers stood tense, their eyes scanning the security feeds. Hundreds of Zyvar soldiers patrolled the hangars, the barracks, the ventilation shafts, every possible entry point was locked down. Or so they thought. Because Baba Yaga was already inside. The first kill. Inside a maintenance crawlspace, Baba Yaga waited. She had infiltrated the ship hours ago, bypassing their scanners, slipping past their guards. She had studied their patrol routes, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Now, it was time to break them. A lone Zyvar soldier walked beneath her hiding spot, his rifle sweeping the hall. He was alert, but he was alone. A fatal mistake. Baba Yaga dropped silently behind him, her knife flashing. A sharp slice. His throat opened, blood sprayed, and she caught him before he could hit the ground. No sound. No struggle. She dragged his dying body into the shadows. And disappeared. The hunt begins. A few minutes later, a Zyvar patrol found the body. "She's here." The trooper's voice was shaking as he reported to command. Vrothkar's eyes narrowed. "Seal the bridge. Activate the purge protocols. She does not leave this ship alive." The Zyvar soldiers moved in squads, advancing with shields raised, rifles primed. Baba Yaga watched them from the rafters, her heart steady, her hands still. She was outnumbered. Outgunned. But they were hunting her the wrong way. They were moving together. Tight formations. A good tactic in a firefight. But suicide against her. Because in close quarters, a single grenade could end them all. She pulled the pin and dropped it. Explosions and chaos. Boom. The hallway erupted, fire and shrapnel tearing through the squad. Blood sprayed across the walls, and the surviving Zyvar staggered back, dazed. That was their second mistake. Because Baba Yaga was already moving. Before the smoke cleared, she rushed in. A blade slipped under a jaw. A gun pressed against the temple, one suppressed shot, one body down. Another twist of the knife, another soldier fell. In 5 seconds, the entire squad was dead. But she wasn't done yet. The lights go out. Inside the bridge, Vrothkar heard the explosion. Then, the lights flickered. The ship went dark. "What's happening?" Captain Vrelka shouted. "We've lost power to sectors 6 through 9, a technician stammered. "All security feeds are down." Vrothkar's jaw clenched. She's in the system. Baba Yaga had hacked their controls. She was isolating them. Cutting off reinforcements. Turning their ship into a coffin. And the Sci-Fi knew it. The fear was spreading. No escape. Down in the barracks, more Sci-Fi troops panicked. Their comms were filled with whispers. She's picking us off. She's in the vents. I heard something. A gunshot cut him off. A door slammed shut, locking them inside. Then, a hissing sound. Gas. Baba Yaga had sealed the exits and was flooding the room with a neurotoxin she had taken from a Sci-Fi supply crate. The soldiers choked, clawed at their throats. One by one, they collapsed. The Sci-Fi were losing control. Bridge breach. Vrothkar's claws tapped against the control panel, his rage barely contained. Then, sir, the main door. The massive blast door to the bridge began to open. Against their will. Vrothkar snapped around. Seal it. Too late. A flashbang rolled into the room. Boom. Blinding light. Deafening sound. The Sci-Fi staggered, disoriented. Then. Gunfire. Baba Yaga moved like a ghost. A Sci-Fi raised his weapon, a bullet took out his knee. Another turned, a blade plunged into his throat. Vrelka fired wildly, missing every shot. A single round hit his visor, shattering it. He collapsed, gasping for breath. Only Vrothkar remained. The final confrontation. Vrothkar drew his energy blade. A plasma sword, crackling with power. Baba Yaga stared him down. You think you can stop me, human? His voice was filled with fury. She tilted her head. No. Then she shot him in the leg. Vrothkar roared, staggering back. Another shot, his other leg buckled. He fell to his knees, clutching his wounds. Baba Yaga walked forward, slow, calculated. She knelt, pressing her gun against his forehead. His breath was ragged. What are you? He growled. She leaned in. Baba Yaga. Then, she pulled the trigger. The fall of the Dominion's wrath. Baba Yaga stood over the Sci-Fi's corpse, the bridge silent. The ship was hers. She moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys. Inputting new coordinates. Destination? The Sci-Fi homeworld. A message broadcasted across the Dominion's fleet. A single, human voice. I'm coming for you. Then, she activated the ship's self-destruct. A final act of vengeance. A reckoning. Baba Yaga walked off the bridge, disappearing into the corridors. Behind her, Dominion's wrath burned. Baba Yaga didn't look back as she walked through the burning corridors of the Dominion's wrath. The ship trembled, explosions ripping through its hull as the self-destruct sequence counted down. She moved with absolute calm, stepping over Sci-Fi bodies, her boots leaving a trail of bloody footprints. The enemy fleet watched in stunned silence as the crown jewel of the Sci-Fi Armada, once a symbol of power, was now a flaming wreck, falling apart from the inside. But Baba Yaga was not done. Her mission was not just to kill soldiers. Her mission was to end the Sci-Fi. And for that, she needed to strike the heart. The Sci-Fi homeworld. Hijacking the fleet. She entered a hangar bay, her eyes sweeping the docked ships. Fighters, bombers, shuttles, one in particular stood out. A high-speed assault corvette, prepped for long-range warp jumps. Perfect. She boarded the vessel, her fingers moving over the controls like she had flown it 100 times before. The ship hummed to life, its thrusters priming. Then, she activated the ship-wide comms. Across the Sci-Fi fleet, her voice echoed. You should have never come to Earth. Then, she punched the thrusters. The corvette launched from the dying capital ship, just as the Dominion's wrath detonated. The shockwave rippled through space, tearing apart nearby Sci-Fi ships, their hulls shredded by the explosion. In the chaos, Baba Yaga slipped away, her stolen ship vanishing into hyperspace. The Sci-Fi throne world, Zyverus Prime. The Sci-Fi homeworld was a fortress world, a planet wrapped in steel and protected by a massive orbital defense grid. A planet where billions of Sci-Fi lived, ruled by the Sci-Fi High Council. The war leaders. The strategists. The ones who had ordered the attack on Earth. Baba Yaga was coming for them. When her corvette dropped out of hyperspace, alarms blared across Zyverus Prime. Unknown vessel detected. It's broadcasting no ID tags. Weapons primed, wait, by the gods, it's her. Panic spread like a virus. The Sci-Fi knew the stories. They had seen the footage of Baba Yaga's massacre aboard the Dominion's wrath. Now she was here, on their doorstep. Alone. And they were terrified. Breaking the defenses. The Xiva orbital fleet mobilized, dozens of capital ships and interceptors scrambling to intercept her. Baba Yaga pushed the corvette's thrusters to max. She weaved through laser fire, dodging plasma bolts by mere inches. A Xiva destroyer locked onto her with torpedoes. She jerked the controls, sending her ship barreling straight toward it. At the last second, she rolled under its belly, making the torpedoes slam into the destroyer itself. Boom. One ship down. More Xiva fighters swarmed her. She flipped switches, activated countermeasures, and dropped decoy flares. She wasn't just flying, she was hunting. Baba Yaga spun the corvette, locked onto a squad of enemy fighters, and unleashed the ship's railguns. Metal slugs tore through Xiva ships, breaking them apart mid-air. More explosions. More chaos. Baba Yaga pushed forward, breaking through the enemy defense grid and plunging toward the planet's surface. Landing in the capital. She aimed for Xivarus Prime's capital city, where the High Council resided. The city's anti-air guns roared to life, sending streams of plasma into the sky. Baba Yaga ejected. The corvette, on autopilot, crashed into a military tower, sending a fireball into the air. Baba Yaga, meanwhile, descended like a ghost, her chute snapping open just long enough to slow her fall before she hit the ground rolling. She landed in the heart of enemy territory. And she had one target left. The High Council chambers. A one-woman war. Xiva troops swarmed the capital, setting up barricades, deploying mechs, tanks, and gunships. Baba Yaga walked forward, unshaken. She had stolen Xiva weapons, a plasma rifle in one hand, a blade in the other. The Xiva commander shouted. "Kill her." She moved first. A sniper round took out the first Xiva officer. A grenade rolled under an enemy tank. Boom. Mechs opened fire, their rotary cannons shredding through buildings, but she darted between cover, firing precise shots at their exposed joints. One by one, the machines fell. A Xiva gunship hovered overhead, its cannons aiming. She fired a rocket into its cockpit. The pilot never saw it coming. More troops fell. A platoon of elites charged her, thinking they could overwhelm her. She met them head-on. Blades flashed. Gunfire roared. And when the smoke cleared, only Baba Yaga was left standing. Ending the war. The High Council chambers were a fortress, protected by the strongest Xiva warriors. It didn't matter. Baba Yaga breached the gates, cutting through the guards like they were nothing. The High Councilors cowered in fear. One of them, a bloated Xiva official, begged. "Please, we surrender." Baba Yaga raised her rifle. Earth doesn't accept surrender. And she opened fire. In seconds, the Xiva High Council was wiped out. The war was over. The legend is born. Outside, the remaining Xiva soldiers heard the news. Their leaders were dead. Their homeworld was burning. Their army was shattered. And all because of one woman. They had mocked Earth's women. Now, they would never forget her name. Baba Yaga. The human demon who had destroyed an empire. She disappeared into the ashes of their fallen world, her mission complete. Her vengeance satisfied. And the legend of Baba Yaga spread across the stars, a warning to any species that dared to cross humanity again. Fear the women of Earth. Because if you don't, she will come for you. And there will be no mercy.